Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
We are taking a break from Indian politics, India's borders and coronavirus, but only to some extent from coronavirus because I will mention it towards the end with something significant. So we are shifting from all of this and looking at American politics. Why? Because some important pointers have now come up because it's just a few months left for the US presidential elections. That will be November first week. So this is that little time that is left now. We are already mid-June. Now, what is significant now is that the gap between opinion polls for Donald Trump and Joe Biden is now increasing in terms of Biden going ahead. So initially, they were very close. Trump was at some point ahead, then they were very close. Then it was generally presumed that because Biden is so low-key, Trump will walk all over him. Then coronavirus came and it was widely seen that Trump had mishandled it. So Trump lost out. But then again with these protests and riots, Trump tried to rev up his base to get his base together, which by the way has happened. Now it does look like that is at this point not enough, and the gap between him and Biden is increasing. That means Biden is now going ahead. Biden is enlarging the lead. Now there are polls and polls and polls and there are analysis on polls. It's a whole industry, particularly in America. So one thing I could quote to you is the Economist's tracker, which will now track the US presidential election almost on real-time basis. That today puts the odds of a Biden victory at 82%. That's a lot. But once again, that really doesn't mean that much because that changes all the time. So I'm doing something that I've never done in my life, talking about elections and politics. And I don't think I will do it again talking about Indian elections at least. That is the odds in the betting market. But my dear friend Ruchir Sharma, who knows America very well, Ruchir Sharma, the author, you've seen many of his books and you've seen him talk on TV, very smart guy. He says that in America, if you really want to know what's happening, check the betting market. So the betting market in America, which is legal, which is overground, this is not your Satta Bazaar, somebody calls and says, isko itna, not like that. These are odds that are listed and these are websites where you can check these odds. So once again, I find it funny that I'm doing it, but on Ruchir's authority, I'm looking at some betting odds. For the first time, while opinion polls have been putting Biden ahead for quite some time, for the first time, odds in the betting market have shifted away from Trump towards Joe Biden. So people put their money on this stuff, so they are expected to know better. So I have two sets of data from betting market. One is from Betfair, and this my young colleague Srijan Shukla has picked out for me. Betfair, which shows that on 4th of March, Trump was 53.9% in the betting market, Biden was 40%. So Trump had a 13.9%, almost a 14% lead, which is a lot. April 13, which is 5 weeks after, about 5 weeks after 4th of March, Trump was still 50%, declined just a little bit from 53.9, and Biden had gone up just a little from 40 to 42. So Trump was still comfortable. Come June 4, that is almost 7 weeks after April 13. Come June 4, and what's happened? There's a dramatic shift. Trump is now down to 43% and Biden has gone to 47.3%. These are the betting odds on Betfair. June 10, that is just a week after June 4, this gap has expanded. So June 10, Trump is 40.5% and Biden is 52.6%. That is a sizable distance now in the betting market. And we look at opinion polls also. Then you look at the other platform, that is Odds Checker. Odds as in odds of winning or losing, Odds Checker. Odds Checker shows that the odds on Biden winning are 6-1, odds on Trump are 5-4. What that matters generally is, so Biden, the points given to Biden as the front runner is minus 137. Points given to Trump as the underdog is plus 125. What that generally means, as I understand it, I'm not a betting man, as I understand it, to earn 100 rupees on your bet, in addition to obviously what you bet, you need to put 137 on Biden. So if you put 137 on Biden, you will get $100 back, which means the odds on Biden winning are higher. The more the underdog, for example, if the underdog score was minus 5,000, then a bet on that would get you a profit of $50,000. A $100 bet on that will get you a profit of $50,000 plus, of course, the money that you put in, $100. So that is how the situation is on odds checker. Once again, on odds checker, if you come at the overall percentage, then we come to what we had mentioned to you just now, which is 52.6% for Biden and 40.5% for Trump. Now, look at other opinion polls and approval ratings. On all opinion polls, and I checked this out from 538.com. 538.com is run by Nate Silver, who's America's most famous pollster. I know that these have not been good years for pollsters anywhere, most of all in America, because 2016, a lot of them went very wrong. But Nate Silver is the most respected and the most detailed, and he runs 538.com. He founded it. 538.com now shows that Trump's approval ratings are 40.8% and his disapproval ratings now are 54.8%. Now, at Gallup, in fact, shows Trump's approval ratings at 39%. That's very bad, because that's the kind of ratings I read in some of these writings. That's the kind of ratings that Jimmy Carter had when he came for re-election, and George H.W. Bush, that is the senior Bush, had. So from 39, it's very difficult to recover, it seemed like that. And both dealt with large unemployment in their last few months, just as Donald Trump does right now. Nate Cohen, who writes in the New York Times, also maintains a very good database. And if you are interested in US politics, please follow him. And also, if you are just a politics buff, just see how electoral politics popularity are analyzed. So Nate Cohen says that Biden today looks stronger to defeat an incumbent than anybody since Clinton in 1992. That was Clinton versus senior Bush. So in 28 years, he looks the most likely to beat an incumbent. Beating an incumbent is tough. He also points out that, say, until February, the gap was not so much. In fact, they were about even Stevens, and we know what a good campaigner Trump is. But two things happened. One, Bernie Sanders got out of the way. So that vote or popularity also shifted to Biden. And second, then the pandemic came, and then increasingly an image was built, well deserved, I think, that Trump handled the pandemic very badly. Now look at some other data, again from 538. This tells you that Trump, where has he suffered these losses? Where has he lost his popularity? Big time. Big time he has lost his popularity among women. So among women now, Trump has a minus 25% compared to Biden, a minus 25. It's not as if he was particularly popular among women. Even in 2016, he was minus 14. But minus 14 now becomes minus 25. You might ask, how come he was minus 14 among women, he still won in 2016? I'll give you the answer. Because even today among men, he's 6% above. So he's 6% above, and then other demographics come in, black, white, Hispanic, etc., etc. So that's how he won. He won very narrowly, as we know, in 2016. And this is the count of registered voters. So among male voters, he is 6% above, which is how it was in 2016. Female, he was 14% negative, now he's 25% negative. That's a big change. Then the important thing is that usually you will find pada likhas or people who go to good universities, etc., whites also, as they get more educated, they tend to vote for Democrats, or they are not so committed to Republicans. Whereas the working class, particularly Trump, the white working class is Trump's base. Now, some damage he has suffered there, which is significant. So, this study says that decline is pronounced among white voters without college degrees. Important. So, these are then states like Ohio, Iowa. These were generally states that Trump would have expected to win. But that's where you find these are working class, white working class states. And you find his decline there is quite prominent. If you look at white voters without college degrees, Trump now has a 21-point lead still, 21 percentage point lead still. It's not as if he's trailing. But this is compared to his lead in first week of March, which was 31%. So a 31% lead among his most cohesive base has now declined to 21%. In 2016, for reference, it was 29%. So this is what essentially swung the election for him. Then you look at white college graduates. White college graduates, Biden now has a 20 percentage point lead. This is 4% more than it was in March, and 8% more than it was for the Democratic candidate in 2016, and 26% more than 2012 when Obama was coming up for re-election. If you look at voters aged between 18 and 34, Biden now leads that by 22 points. In March, April, he only had a lead of 6 points there. So that's a big change. But remember, American age demographics are very different from India's age demographics. America is not as young a population as India is. So in India, if you had a 22-point lead between 18 and 34, you were guaranteed a landslide. But in America, that's not true. You also need a lot of the older voters, where obviously Trump is quite strong. This lead, however, his lead of 22% in the age group 18 to 34 is better than what Hillary ever had. Next, in the four key swing states, that's North Carolina, Florida, Wisconsin, Arizona, 5 states, and Michigan, Biden is now ahead. In fact, in 2016, Trump only won Michigan and Wisconsin by 1 percentage point or less. So it was very narrow. And without that, he could not have won the presidential election. Trump's lead also is narrow in Texas, Georgia, Pennsylvania. So this is now not just close, but it looks like you have a front runner at this point of time. Arizona, now theoretically, again analysis on 538 tells us, theoretically it's possible that Trump still wins if he can win Arizona and every other state which usually votes Republican, because America works on the electoral college system. And in Arizona, Biden's lead is only 3%. So maybe it's narrow. We'll see what happens when the campaign picks up. But the betting market does not believe this. The betting market thinks now that Biden is substantially and substantively ahead. Then you look at the question of approval ratings. Now, this is another very interesting point about Trump, that Trump, of all the American presidents, has had among the stablest approval ratings. Approval ratings is, do you approve of the president or not? His approval ratings have generally stayed between 40% and 45%. So it's not as if on bad days it's gone to 35, 30, 28. That hasn't happened. It hasn't even gone up very much from 45. That means his base is intact. That is the important part, that his base is intact. In fact, if you check out in January 2017, his approval rating was 45.5%, his disapproval rating was 41.3%. Today, on February 1 this year, his approval rating was 43.4%, his disapproval rating was 52%. So the shift is not dramatic. We told you his approval rating now is 40.8%, disapproval 54.8%. So his approval rate is still between 40 and 45. Disapproval has come down, so his base is intact. That is a very important fact. So again I quote 538. Does he then qualify to be called Teflon Don, that nothing will stick to him? No, they say he is not indestructible. He is destructible. And why is he destructible? Because he is now losing out or falling backwards in many key states. So I also have analysis from some pundits who also tell us how he might actually swing it back in his favor. Because Trump has come back from very difficult situations, impossible situations, even in his business life. So there's an article in the New York Times, you will see that on the screen, by Michael Hanlon, who is a fellow at Brookings Institute, who says that, look, people are angry with Trump right now for how he's handled the pandemic. But in November, when people go out to vote, the pandemic may not be the issue. So people may hold you responsible for mistakes that you've made in the past, but that's more to fuel a campaign. But when you go into vote, then people think about what are this guy's plans for me, not the past. And he gives the example of 2004 when John Kerry defeated George Bush, although it was widely seen that George Bush had handled Iraq badly, George Bush Jr., and he was unpopular. But he says that, look, John Kerry went ahead, but he did not have a plan for Iraq, etc. That was very different from Bush Jr.'s. So people didn't see enough of a change, and people, instead of voting on Bush's mistakes or what mistake Bush had done wrong, were now looking at what is it that Kerry would do that is different. So he says that Biden has to be careful not to repeat the mistakes that Kerry made in 2004. In fact, he says after 18 straight months of bad news, Bush still beat Kerry in 2004. So that's one. Second, there's an article, then he goes on to say how Trump is a survivor. Then I take you to an article from Politico. It's a beautifully written profile, long profile. I'll give you a link. Survivor Trump, which tells us the story of how in 1990s Trump had got, his businesses had gone bust, but how artfully he used bankruptcies to rescue his business. Now, how do you use bankruptcies to rescue to your business? You need another cut the clutter, but done by somebody who understands American businesses better than I can from reading anything. So I'm not going there. But read this article, and Trump is known to fight back with his back to the wall and recover. In fact, even in 1995, when everything seemed to have gone haywire for him, and he was losing everything everywhere, he actually did something totally audacious. He actually publicly listed his company and raised capital. So he's not somebody you can write off so easily. There's also an article in Financial Times from Janan Ganesh, Janan Ganesh, I'm so sorry, apologize if I don't pronounce your name right, who says that, look, base is important in American elections, but the analysis is that the Republican Party cannot win the presidential election only on its base. It needs other voters, whereas Democrats can win their election entirely on their base, because Democrat base is larger. It is less cohesive, but it's larger. So if Democrats vote as one, then they are more likely to win in spite of the Republican base being together. So he says that Biden now has to deal with a new challenge, which is that how does he keep his base cohesive? So he would have thought initially that with Elizabeth Warren gone and Bernie Sanders gone, all Democrats will obviously gravitate towards him. But there is a lot of Democratic voters, younger, radical voters, more on the left who were not happy that the candidate wasn't Sanders or Warren but Biden. Now, normally they would have gravitated to him, but today, because of these protests, because of the race issues, their concerns are becoming more heightened. So, will they be happy to have a Biden who then carries out progressive reform and not a radical reform? Because how does Biden now deal with defund the police? Because the other side of defund the police is use those funds and put those into employment, education, health, etc., 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 fund other services. And that's what he says now complicates Joe Biden's choice of his running mate. Because running mate usually balances the president and fills the gaps. The running mate so far, who was the front runner and who was actually being checked out, was going through due diligence, was Amy Klobuchar. But the problem is she's from Minnesota. And what is the problem with her being from Minnesota? That is the state of George Floyd, and she's not black, she's white, she's not African American. So do you then pick a white running mate from the state in which Floyd died? Floyd was killed. So those are issues that are coming up now. So he has to find another running mate, and yet he cannot take somebody very new, because given the fact that he's 77, he has to also show that his running mate also has some experience, not a completely newcomer. So these are complications that are coming in. I like a line also from Rana Faruhar's article in Financial Times. I'll give you all the links, who says that all these protests that you see about race, etc., is not so much just about race. It's about systemic inequalities which have been building up over time. And once again, good line, she says that it seems to me that the balance of public opinion has shifted from capital to labor. And the implication is that Biden will have to reflect that. Biden can't just sleepwalk his way into victory. So that is how this complicated scenario is. Once again, this is one time where bettors, market makers, pollsters, pundits all agree, but all with their qualifications and caveats. So when things change one way or the other on this, in a month and a half or so, maybe we will come back to you, because now this campaign has begun in earnest. Trump actually wants to go out holding public rallies, even though coronavirus numbers are rising in many states of America, particularly after the lockdown was lifted and now the protests. Now, coronavirus, I told you that I will not fully go away from it. I will just mention one important fact today, and that carries on from what we said in our episode 496 yesterday. That is Delhi. Delhi is today the most problematic state in India, although it's a tiny state. So we had told you that test positivity rate depends also, one, on how much infection is there, and second, how much you are testing. So if your TPR goes above 10%, you are supposed to increase your tests. It means you are not testing enough. So I am listing for you states where test positivity rate is higher than the national average, substantially higher than the national average. National average is 7.7, not healthy but not alarming. But if you take out these states, then the national average maybe will be less than half of that. So what are these states and what do these figures tell us? You will see the chart, but I'll read these for you. Delhi is 38.23%. Maharashtra is 23.23%, it's number 3, but I'm listing it at number 2 simply because it has this city of Mumbai. So if you put Mumbai against Delhi, picture will be different. Telangana, once again very significant. It is the second worst in the country, 25.64%, and again very significant because it includes this big city metropolis of Hyderabad. So all these states are testing too little. Tripura, tiny state, I don't see why they should be testing so little, but 19.17%. Gujarat, sizable state, 14.38%. Tamil Nadu, 10.6%. Haryana, 10.0%, 04%. Jharkhand, 9.6%. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 states which actually pull down all of India's figures, and all these states need to test more. Good thing today is that now that the center has pretty much taken over this issue in Delhi, an announcement has been made. Today is the 15th, that in the next 5 days, that means by the 20th, Delhi's tests will go up to 20,000 per day. That is from about 5,000 per day now. When that happens, you will see two things, so be prepared. One, you will see your positive numbers go up. Don't be alarmed. Basically, you are getting to know the truth right now. There is no fear bigger than the fear of the unknown. So this will be what you imagine will always be less worse than what you will see. And second, as more tests are held, this test positivity ratio will come down. And if it comes down below 10%, then you will say, all right, I am testing enough.